One day had Ruby asked her older sister, Yang, if they could do some training against each other to improve their skills to become a huntress. Yang, she didn't mind to help her younger sister improving her skills. So they've been training since early noon to late afternoon. After a few hours of being training against each other, Yang told her younger sister that she had to go because she had some other things to take care of. So after that Yang had left, Ruby remained and she felt very happy and confident that she is slowly improving her own skills to become a huntress. She knows it's a long way left to become as a huntress, but she is still confident enough that her older sister is willing to help her to improve her skills. And as she was just walking around by herself in the woods near her home, she suddenly heard this loud sound in this suddenly near instance. This flash of light. It literally blinded her for only a brief moment. She had no idea what was the cause of this. And somehow in her mind, she got curious. She started to follow, well, going toward the direction where this sound and the light came from. At first, she didn't know what to believe. She thought maybe it could have been a pack of Grimms that they are training to hunt down. But then, when she came to this small clearing in the woods, there were no signs of any Grimms or at all, but another strange being or creature lay on the ground, unconscious. She had never seen anything like it, but it looked to be almost like a humanoid in shape. She had no idea what kind of creature this were. She had never seen anything like it, and as she was standing behind some bushes, looking at this creature, it seems like it wasn't moving. She thought to herself, is it dead or is it alive? She had no idea what to do, and even before she could telling herself to just go get some help, somehow she walked out of the bushes and slowly walked up to this creature, and as she was only a few feet away from it, it suddenly opened its eyes and she got startled, and before she could even run to hide, the creature stood up, or at least sat up, and looked at her, and she was frozen. She had no idea what to do, but she raised her weapon against this creature. But this creature didn't do anything, not even slightly of things to as being provoked. Then, even this was a thought of her mind. What if this creature could actually understand her something? She didn't know if this creature could talk or anything, or at least basically understand her. So she tried to talk to it. And to her amazement, this creature did respond with a nod that it actually understood her, and she asked if he or it could talk. And he said that he could, and that he understood her perfectly. Then he asked her who she is. At first, she was still holding her weapon up, and she said her name was Ruby Rose, and she asked his name. His name was Shadow the Hedgehog. She said that she had never seen anything like it. And still holding her weapon up, she demanded, almost requesting to know where he was from and why he was there, and if he's serving the Grimms. And he said that he didn't tell her where he was from. He was like an arrogant type. But he said that he didn't serve anyone, not even the so-called Grimms, even though he did ask what the Grimms were. She tried to explain that they are evil darkness spirits called Grimms. But he shook his head and said that he has never heard of such things. Then he just turned around and walked off. She was still standing there, puzzled of what things or at least what she just imagined of what she just saw. She first believed that maybe she's just daydream or something, because in any other instant, this being, so-called shadow, was gone. She decided to follow after him, and only about a couple of minutes after she found him, still in the woods, looking around, and he just stood there and said, "Why are you following me?" he said, almost angrily. I just... She didn't exactly what to say to him. "Well, tell me, why are you following me?" he almost demanded to know. "I'm sorry, but I had never seen anything like you before, and please tell me, where are you from?" He made a big sigh, and then just before he didn't even turn around and just said, "I'm from a world called Mobius." Then he asked her, "Where am I?" And then she said that he was on Remnant. And he said, "I had never heard of this world." Then she asked, "What is Mobius? And how can he talk?" And she knows about some creatures, but she had never seen anything like him before. And then she asked him, "Now that you're in on my world, where are you going? Are you going back to your world?" But he said, for after a brief moment of silence, that he didn't know how to even return back to his home. And then she said, "Well, since you don't have any way to go back, and since you don't have anywhere to go on this world, why don't you just go with me?" Then he turned around, looked at her, curious, and even though a little bit upset for some reason. "Follow you? Why would I do that? I don't even know you. I mean, who knows that if you're a big villain or something here?" Then she started laughing and said, "No, I'm not a villain." "Where are you?" She said that she's a human. She said that she's a human, but she's a huntress in training. Then he explained, or at least asked, "In training for what? Hunting for what?" he asked. "Monsters? Demons?" But her response was, in order to fight this evil spirit of darkness called the Grims. "You mentioned this before." "Fine, I will go with you then," he said. Then he just followed after her. He took her She took him to a small place where she lived. "Make yourself at home," she said, and then she went in the kitchen and just grabbed something and gave it to him. "What's this?" "Well, I thought you maybe were hungry." "Huh. Well, thanks." And he just eat it. So, Shadow, how did you end up in my world in the first place? Do you even remember? Um, at first he didn't want to even to answer. He felt like he'd been interrogated. "I mean, I'm only curious," she said. "I only want to know how you somehow end up in my world. If you have any clue, maybe we can figure out something that you could send back to your own world." "Fine, I will tell you. Basically, I was fighting against an old enemy of mine called Dr. Eggman in my world. He used some sort of powerful, mysterious, magical emeralds called Chaos Emeralds. Then he explained that this Eggman character used those emeralds in order to dominate the world. But him and his other friends attacked Eggman's base operations, and during the attack, this machine that held the emeralds got damaged, and it somehow sent him to this world. And she asked him how to describe these emeralds. He said that he used to have his own, but that was stolen by this Eggman character. And he said that even without those emeralds, he still has some powers. She asked, "What kind of powers?" He said that he could make some called chaos spears, chaos control, like teleport himself from a distant another place. She was looked very curious and asked if there was any other powers. But without the Chaos Emerald, his power was limited to a certain extent. Then she asked him how old he was, because he looked very young. He explained that he is 50 years old. She looked puzzled. She said, "You can't be 50. You don't even look like it." But then he chuckled and said, "That's because I'm immortal." What? Yes, I am in fact immortal hedgehog. Or at least that was when I was created. Created? Then he said about a brief part that he was created by a man, a scientist, a doctor, in order to find a cure for his granddaughter's illness. But unfortunately, she was killed after he was created. But he didn't want to talk more about that since it only brought more sad memories for him. And after he had finished his food, he was about to leave, but then she said, "Wait, where are you going?" "Huh, I can just stay here, can I?" "Of course you can." "What?" "I mean, you're in a new world. Do you have any other places you can go?" "I mean, to be fair, I thought you were a Grim or something, and if others see you, other hunters or huntresses, even experienced hunters or something like that, or those in training, they will all mistake you as for a Grim. They will attack you." "Huh, they can try. I have beat all kinds of experienced villains or bad guys before. It passed." "Yes, but can you defeat like a whole academy? Like I say, over 100 people at the same time? Some are very years experienced hunters and huntresses. Others is still in training. Could you even try that?" That made him speechless. "Perhaps not. But I can't just stay here. I had to figure out a way to go back home." "I mean, you can stay here, and I can help you. I promise to help you." So, she allowed him to stay. And even though after they were only like a couple of days after that shadow appeared on Remnant, he was restless. But at least he had shelter if something would happen. But she told him to always be careful that no others could see him, because she couldn't promise his safety just in case of like that. But then he did ask her once, since she's a huntress in training, why is she helping him? Why hasn't she turned him to his others? But her response was, "Well, you didn't look like a Grim, and even when you saw me, I mean, you didn't even attack me or something. And honestly, I thought you were weak." "Weak?" He laughed. "No, I mean, weak stated after that being teleported here." Ah, makes sense. But despite that, her relationship with Shadow was quite rocky, even though he was still very arrogant many times. And he'd prefer not want to talk about most of his own childhood or his past life back on his old world. But he didn't mind to talk about his world and his friends. One of them, what he called, was a very arrogant, didn't ran into danger without thinking first or make a plan. His name was Sonic the Hedgehog. He was the fastest. But as Ruby knew that at some point someone will figure out or at least find out about Shadow. And one day when she got home after being training, she heard someone talking. It was actually Shadow, and it was a woman. At first she didn't recognize the voice until she opened the door and saw it was her older half-sister, Yang. Yang apparently came over to see her younger sister for a visit when she came across Shadow. When she walked in, Yang saw her and smiled and said, "Oh, I didn't know you had a new friend living with you," she said almost with a grin. She realized that her sister was a little bit upset or at least mad at her because letting this strange being living with her without telling her about it. Then, after finding out that Shadow had told her everything, like where he's from, or at least what he told her, at least, and that he had been staying with her for at least a couple of weeks. And Yang, who told, have a conversation with Ruby in more private. She was like, "Sis, how could you bring this shadow into your home? I mean, knowing how the others were to find out about this, you could have you could have been expelled from the training. I mean, letting a whole new different creature in your home. I know, but what I could have done? I could just have left him there, couldn't I?" "True, but you could at least told me." "Sis, if I told you like, oh, by the way, Jang, I have found this strange creature and he's now staying in my house or my home. You want to meet him?" And you'd probably attack him the first thing you saw him, wouldn't you? Uh, you have a good point. I mean, you're not always being the fastest to just act on before thinking. Uh, yeah, a good point there. But do you trust him though? I mean, he had been living at my place for at least a few weeks, and during this time, he hasn't been doing anything to harm me. In fact, we have learned more about each other, so I don't think he's that dangerous. I mean, sis, how do you know for sure that he isn't dangerous? What if it's just he's waiting, spending time waiting for the right moment to attack you? But Ruby told her sister that somehow she had this feeling that she could trust Shadow. And Yang just looked at her younger sister and completely understand. But she told her if Shadow would show any signs of aggression or any slight signs of her being attacked, don't hesitate to reach out to her and she will take care of Shadow for her. Even though Rose knows her sister well and that she would do anything to protect her younger sister from harm. But she promised. But even after Yang had left, Shadow was really not unaware of this, but Ruby couldn't just keep it herself, so she told Shadow. But he said that he wasn't surprised that his appearance would make Yang to look that concerned of a younger sister, but he told her that he didn't mind, and he absolutely understand why Yang reacted like that. And this relationship between Shadow and Ruby was good and continued to be growing as a strong friendship. But one day, when Ruby was out for training in the woods by herself, suddenly, when she was training, and without by accident, this big branch somehow fell on top of her head and she was unconscious immediately. And Shadow was still at her place, just waiting for her to show up. And he had this feeling that he needed to go look for her. So he used Chaos Control and teleport to the place that she usually go to. Because she had told him to where she usually go for her training. And she, he found her unconscious and he teleported her back to her place and even went off to find Yang because he knew where she lived. And after Shadow told her that Ruby had been in an accident, Yang immediately accused Shadow from being the cause of it. But he told her firmly that he has no intention to hurt Ruby. And he wasn't even there. He is not the one responsible for attacking her sister. But he could promise to take her to see her just in case if she wanted. So she agreed. He teleported them both back to to Ruby's home. And luckily for her, that time, Ruby had slowly woken up and was still much at daze, but have a serious headache. Yang, who had been given the basic training of the first help training, She looked at her younger sister, and it wasn't that serious. Afterwards, she basically described what had happened. She immediately apologized to Shadow for accusing him for attacking her younger sister. When Ruby heard that, she immediately got defensive because why would Shadow attack her why would she be attacked by Shadow? Like, why would he attack her and then suddenly go find Yang to bring her back to her place? Yang once again apologized to Shadow for accusing him for attacking her younger sister. Shadow said that he understood and appreciated the apology and accepted it. But there was just another thing about it. Shadow said that there was something else that he wanted to talk to them, to tell Ruby. Despite knowing her for only a few weeks, and seeing how she is dedicated to her family, friends, and also her training to become a huntress. Ruby was taken aback of Shadow's suddenly statement. She asked Shadow if he was quite serious about it. And he said, yes, I'm actually quite serious about it. She was really taken aback of his suddenly confession of his feelings for her. But she was just happy. But then it was another small problem they had to take care of. And that would have been Ruby's parents. They may not accept Shadow as Ruby's new boyfriend. After all, he is not even a human, and that he is another creature. But Yang, on the other hand, had accepted Shadow as Ruby's boyfriend. And of course, Yang suggested they should bring over their parents, or at least Ruby's parents, so they can interact with Shadow, so get to know him, and hopefully accept it. But Ruby said that even if her parents would not accept Shadow as a boyfriend, she would still be with them, no matter what. Even though Shadow said probably not the best to cut off your family like that. But she was willing to do so if it would come to that result. A few days later, Shadow was eventually introduced to Ruby's parents. He was not nervous at all, but Ruby was quite nervous. And Yang was actually also there just as another support. They only was told that Ruby had a boyfriend named Shadow, but they didn't mention that he was not a human. But when they saw him, they first thought that he was some sort of pet. But when they said that was Ruby's new boyfriend, they could not believe it. But after they have a serious conversation between Ruby, Yang, and Shadow, and later Shadow had a conversation alone with Ruby's father, he was convinced that he could protect Ruby. And soon had the whole community was aware of Ruby and Shadow being a couple. Because in the beginning when most people saw him, they first expected that he was a new type of Grim, because many were about to attack him. But Ruby or Yang or both of them defended Shadow by standing in front of him. But Shadow said that he didn't need to do that. He could easily defend himself if it would come to that. But eventually people had accepted Shadow as Ruby's new partner. And after being together for 3 years, Ruby and Shadow had talked about it one day to settle down, start a family, or something like that. But on their 3rd year anniversary, Shadow did actually propose to Ruby, and she accepted. They decided to have a small wedding though, just to be close friends and families at most. And on their wedding day, Ruby was so nervous of how they would turn out. By the end, it was worth it, because being married with Shadow was the absolute best thing for her. And even though they only went to a small cabin by near the ocean as the honeymoon, but it still was a great time for both of them. After being married for 3 years, Shadow and Ruby wanted to start a family together, but there was a small problem, and that was the fact that Shadow wasn't a human, and they weren't unable to have any children of their own. But it was the one thing that they could do. Since there was an orphanage in town, so they decided to adopt some children from there. They adopted a boy and a girl, siblings. The boy named Kai and a daughter named Cecilia. Both were really happy to have Ruby as a mother, but at first they were really scared of Shadow. After all, he looked always mad. But when they saw him as a very gentle soul otherwise, they slowly accepted him as a father figure. Even though that Shadow wasn't actually hurt, because Ruby was concerned that their children wouldn't accept Shadow at all as a father, she tried and tried her best over and over to convince both Kai and Cecilia that Shadow was a gentle soul. But Shadow himself, though, he was just happy eventually that Kai and Cecilia had accepted him. And eventually, Kai would get married with a young woman and they had two daughters of their own. The same thing as for Cecilia. She was eventually married with a man and had two daughters of her own as well. And both Kai and Cecilia, they wanted to take the same role as their mother. Cecilia became a huntress, and Kai became a hunter. But it were from time to time during his Shadow's time that he wished that he could go back home. But not knowing if there was any a possibility for him to even go back home, eventually he had accepted the choice that he may not be able to go back. And after a while, he actually had accepted Remnant to be his new home, but more to be happier to be with Ruby Rose. Even Ruby herself was just happy to have met Shadow. After all, he means so much to her, and even have this amazing family with him, it's one of the best things that she has ever asked for. And this is how Ruby Rose and Shadow the Hedgehog found a true love got a big family together. The end.